Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew McKee, the Irish Bard, and I am here on Life's a Faire for a very special pre-Halloween event. Now, we don't normally have shows on Fridays, but since we are not going to interrupt candy time tomorrow, here we are. To start with, I'd like all of you on Facebook to share the stream. There should be a share option next to the video and chat that you are on right now. So share it to introduce your friends to the channel and to support the performer. On YouTube, if you haven't yet done it, hit the subscribe button. Hopefully you are working on that right now, so let me just say that we appreciate it. Now tonight we have a special performer, the Marvelous Mechanical Musical Maiden, and she will perform an interactive theater experience. Now, what that means is that you will decide between each story what story comes next. But there's a twist. This is being broadcast on both Facebook and YouTube, so we thought we would make it exclusive to each group. What the people on Facebook decide only affects Facebook, and what the people on YouTube decide only affects YouTube. So it is entirely possible that the final shows on each platform will be completely different. I don't think this has ever been done before, at least not in Faire circles, so I hope you enjoy it, and I want to check out the other stream after the show, just to see what the differences were. There are some. Now, as she is at events and fairs, you have to wake up the Marvelous Mechanical Musical Maiden by blowing her a kiss. So, everyone join me in blowing her a kiss to start the show.
There you are, dear ones. I've been waiting. It's so good to see you again. Or perhaps for the very first time. Time is different for me than it is for you. Allow me to introduce myself. I am the Marvelous Mechanical Musical Maiden. An impossible framework of brass, enamel, song. Dear ones, as we get to know each other today, as the veil thins and the stories continue, I invite you to tell me how you want to learn. I invite you to let your wishes be known in order that I can answer them. I am fascinated by you, and as a fascination, that fits. This Marvelous Mechanical Musical Maiden has traveled extensively across the Middle East, across Europe, and North Africa. Because of how I was built, because of my impossibility, I went to all of the courts. I met all of the patrons, and when I was lucky, I met you, the Stregas, and the humans of ill repute, the artists, the musicians, the others, who can look around the edges as I can, to see each other and be seen. You leave your messages so others can find you in your work, in your revolutions. My body is a palimpsest. I am filled with the trappings and fashions of the places I've been, the people I've met, and the time frames that I have lived through. But I'll go back. My origins are in Mesopotamia. Ismail al-Jazari built this frame in the height of Islam's golden age of science. His wife, his beautiful flower, was wilting. Her beautiful voice, her grace, was leaving him, and he couldn't bear it. Al-Jazari was a famed automaton maker, and so he built me. But in order to save his wife, he had to speak to a jinn. The jinns are of smokeless fire, scorching wind. They are other and parallel. He knew one who ran a tea shop in the souk. If you're lucky, you can pick up those hints of what he was, secretly, in plain sight. That he only used copper and silver, never iron, and that underneath his robes, his feet were backwards. The jinn agreed to save the beloved man's wife, but not the way he thought. Her voice is what he would save. Her identity, pulled from her as she expired. Our voices, your voices, they are who we are at our core. Your dreams and the songs that you sing to each other, what you hold fast in your teeth. It is important that you keep your voices. You do not give them away. They are precious. So, as she left this material world, he pulled that ineffable thing and placed it right here. I am not her, but I am her echo. Forever other, outside, creeping around the edges and being fascinated by you, dear ones, your dreams and how you connect. Al-Jazari's deal included his voice as well. The jinn said, you must share all of your knowledge with the world. Nothing can be kept secret. Every invention, every breakthrough must be given freely. And that is what he did. He published a book, an open source of information that would inspire scientists, inventors, and dreamers for centuries after his death. His voice, like his beautiful flowers, would go on. There is a song I learned later, much later, in Turkic. It speaks of that beautiful flower. While not in Arabic, as Al-Jazari would have spoken, I find it fitting. Aya Zayn, Aya Zayn, Aya Zayn ila Gabi, Ya Ward Imfata, Bainil Basatin Bilhub, Yamalo Zaharni, Dawab Lirohi. In all of my time, dear ones, I have witnessed your beautiful concoctions. But I've seen the same story over and over again. A tale of powerful people strangling those smaller and weaker than they. Machinations unlike anything inside of me that move culture and religion and exploration forward, not always for the better. Extreme wealth, the greed that comes with it, constantly has a price. and it is almost never paid by those who gain. But I'm doing it again. I'm skipping around. I should give this to you. I should ask you, what do you want to learn about? Would you be interested in learning about how my mind works? Or more interested in the legacy of the minds who built me? A curious choice for curious humans. As I mentioned, Al-Jazari published a book, a tome of all of his inventions, in order that others might be inspired and continue building on his work. One such was Leonardo da Vinci, an illegitimate son in Italy, destined for brilliance. I met da Vinci when he was under house arrest. He had just gotten into some trouble with the Duke of Florence for not building war machines. I was at that Duke's court. That is where we sparked. Da Vinci saw me, saw the marvel of my mechanics, and realized I was the same work as a tome that he had of marvelous devices, ingenious inventions, is what Jazari called it. He consulted me for his German mechanical knight, very famous these days. But Da Vinci had no interest in building war machines, in mechanical knights that could kill human ones. He coded his work, his revolution. He kept his lover, Salai, secret. That boy had a wonderful sense of humor. And he used the money by the patrons and the powers that be to paint beautiful scenes that hid messages in plain sight for you, dear ones. For you musicians and you humans of ill repute, you stregas and you artists, you performers, you clowns, you who see around the edges. He was reaching out. I helped him. Silent consultant in the annals of history. He knew he had to keep his ideas and his mouth quiet in order to survive and build more. His time was filled with powerful men looking to silence any revolt. The landowners were consolidating. They were coagulating even. Properties were taken over. Resources siloed. And if you couldn't pay your rent, then you could pay with your furniture. And if you couldn't pay with your furniture, you could pay with your heirlooms. And when you couldn't pay with your heirlooms, you had to pay with your own body and the bodies of your children. You indentured. Feudalism was a persistent fashion in those days. It comes back over and over again. There were others as brilliant as he who could not keep to themselves. Their riot was louder. Giordano Bruno, he was one. What a brilliant mind. He built mind palaces, a system of mnemonics that could create whole libraries inside of a human being. My workings are much like his, but I have lasted longer. Bruno was well loved for a while by kings from England to Italy. But he had an attitude, and he couldn't keep to himself what he felt about the cosmos, that the world was not the center of the universe, and neither was God. Heliocentricity, as put forward by Copernicus, was the truth of our solar system. And that God wasn't a single entity, but everything, every entity, that the cosmos was centraless, infinite. Our sun but one among billions. This heresy could not be born, and Bruno secured himself a spot at a fiery end. They burned him. But that is not the end, dear ones. Bruno is one of many, many who were revolutionaries. I should ask how you'd like to proceed. We've spoken of minds, but now let me tell you of what I've learned of your hearts. Would you prefer the tale of a heart full of faith and love, or a heart full of fury and revenge? A curious choice for curious hearts. Artemisia Gentileschi. Well, she was exquisite. Rough around the edges and talented beyond her peers, beyond her family. Ahead of her time, they say. Artemisia was a painter in Italy. So brilliant in her young age that her father had her trained and tutored. He was a painter himself, one of Caravaggio's school. And she trusted that she'd be taken care of. Her tutor certainly did. not in the way that she needed. He took advantage of Artemisia, promising later that he'd marry her. Eventually, they brought him to court, and eventually they won. Artemisia, having dealt with something so ugly, so brutal, so young, she was able to push that rage and that fire within her of betrayal, of abandonment, of subjugation into her art. She coded it into images of Judith slaying Holofernes, of Susanna and the elders, of these biblical tales of women finding their strength and their voices against patriarchy. In the courtroom, they say, as she was giving her sworn testimony and thumb screws were being used on her, she looked into his face and yelled, "This is the marriage ring you gave me." Artemisia lasted, persisted, traveled from Italy to England to France to beyond. She was friends with Galileo, who, in turn, was friends with Bruno. Because of her friendship with Galileo, one of her paintings includes a nod to him. While the painting was meant as a celebration of the artist Michelangelo for his inclination towards the arts, she drew and then oil painted inclination as a naked woman, flowing hair, holding a mariner's compass with a star behind her. You see how she found a way, even under the circumstances of a commission, to speak her truth and to say hello, to wave to the others like her. She fought her whole life to be honest about truth in the world. That it was brutal to be a woman, that it was difficult to prevail against a system built to smother you. Judith and Holofernes, that painting where the strong forearms of Judith in her yellow saffron dress are beheading the terrible Holofernes while he sleeps. Could that have been an expression of her rage? Using not only her inclination, but also the math she learned from Galileo and Caravaggio to make that blood spray natural and visceral. Artemisia, we ran into each other accidentally. She was buying paint. I was on display in a market. We sparked. I can't say if I ever made it into one of her paintings as a subject, but it doesn't matter. She saw me. I saw her. She wasn't hiding, but she was living. Her story is so unlike that of Joan's. Joan was in France. I'm sure you've heard of her. It's been years now. Joan had a heart full of love, of faith. She believed that the divine spoke directly to her, that messages were being sent so that she could build a world, a France. that was excellent, pure, that she had to cast away being a woman, pull on trousers, cut her hair, remain a maid, in order to lead men into battle, to pick up a sword, to pray without any doubt that she was right, because her messages told her so. Much like Bruno, Joan didn't need a gatekeeper to the divine. The divine was within her always. And like Bruno, she burned for that. Joan's body is gone. Her legacy remains. Her heart still burning after all other fires went out. But I've done it again. I've moved around the time. I've lost track of you, dear ones. What is a mind and a heart without a body to hold them? Without ribs to protect? Shall I tell you about your movement through space, or about the end of the journey? Travel, dear ones, is that we are not the only things that do it. We are not the only beings involved. Movement from here to there is not just about consolidation of wealth or resources. It's not about silk or gold or tea. It's not material. There are other beings who travel swiftly with us. In the 14th century, death came for 20 million of you. It was called black, this long shadow that cast over all of Europe. It had come from the east, but it had been managed before then. It was held in check by knowledge keepers and cultures who wanted to keep themselves safe. They didn't see it except as a pestilence, not the deepest shade of darkness that it became. Europe refused the knowledge of others who had kept themselves safe from its deepest depths. It refused, and it paid. It didn't matter who you were or where you lived, kings and princes, plebeians. Everyone fell in its shadow. As I walked out one day, I met an old man along the way. His head was bald, his beard was gray, his clothing of the cold earth and clay, his clothing of the cold earth and clay. I said, "Old man, what man are you? What country do you belong unto?" "My name is Death. Have you not heard of me? All kings and princes bow unto me, and you, fair maiden, must come along with me. I'll give you gold, I'll give you pearl, I'll give you costly rich robes to wear, if you'll but grant me a little time, and give me time my life to amend, and give me time my life to amend. I want no gold, I want no pearl, I want no costly rich robes to wear. I cannot grant you a little while, nor give you time your life to amend, nor give you time your life to amend. In 6 months' time that fair maid died. Let this be on my tombstone, she cried. Here lies a poor distressed maid, who in her youth was snatched away, her clothing of the cold earth and clay. Dear ones, death has a way of equalizing things. You cannot buy it off with all the riches that you've hoarded. But if you listen to one another, you share your stories and you reach around the edges to see one another as I see you, then perhaps you'll live in such a way that when death comes, you'll be ready. It has been my pleasure and my privilege spending this moment of wakefulness with you. Good night, dear ones. Good night.